Startle panic. The startle reflex is a rapid, automatic reaction that activates before conscious thought. It is triggered by sudden stimuli, such as loud sounds, abrupt movements, or unexpected touches. Instead of traveling to the thinking parts of the brain, sensory signals are routed directly to the brainstem. This shortcut allows the body to react in milliseconds, but it removes any ability to judge whether the stimulus is actually dangerous. The physical pattern of the startle reflex is highly consistent. The eyes blink forcefully to protect vision. The neck and shoulders contract, pulling the head downward. The arms bend inward toward the torso. This creates a brief protective posture meant to shield vital areas. These movements are coordinated by the reticular formation, a brainstem structure responsible for basic alertness and survival responses, not reasoning or decision-making. In ancestral environments, this reflex helped prepare the body for immediate action, such as freezing or fleeing. In modern environments, it is frequently triggered by harmless events like notifications, falling objects, or nearby conversations. The reflex does not distinguish between meaningful threats and neutral surprises. Its only function is to react instantly. Along with movement, the reflex initiates internal changes. Adrenaline is released, heart rate increases, and muscles tense. These changes occur even if the brain immediately recognizes that there is no danger. Because the reflex completes its action before awareness catches up, the stress response cannot be canceled once started. The startle reflex persists, because slowing it down would require evaluation first, which evolution treated as too risky. As a result, the body continues to panic briefly even when panic serves no purpose. Goosebumps. Goosebumps are caused by a reflex called piloerection. This reflex activates when tiny muscles at the base of hair follicles contract, pulling the hairs upright and creating small bumps on the skin. The signal originates in the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary actions like heart rate and digestion. Once triggered, the response happens automatically and cannot be consciously stopped. In mammals with thick fur, piloerection serves two clear functions. First, raised fur traps air, increasing insulation and reducing heat loss. Second, it makes the animal appear larger when threatened, which can deter predators. In humans, body hair is too fine and sparse for either effect to matter. Raising it provides no meaningful warmth and no visible intimidation. Despite this, the reflex still activates in response to cold, fear, emotional intensity, or even music. The brain interprets these states as signals that once justified piloerection, even though the physical outcome is now useless. The hypothalamus, a brain region involved in temperature regulation and emotional processing, sends the same command it has sent for thousands of generations. Goosebumps often appear during strong emotional moments because the nervous system does not sharply separate physical danger from emotional arousal. Fear, awe, and excitement all activate overlapping pathways. The body reacts as if preparing for a survival challenge, even when the trigger is abstract or symbolic. The persistence of goosebumps illustrates how evolution removes harmful traits faster than neutral ones. Because piloerection does not cause damage, there was no pressure to eliminate it. The reflex remains active, silently firing in situations where it no longer serves any practical role. Light sneezing. The photic sneeze reflex is a genetic quirk that causes sneezing when exposed to sudden bright light, most commonly sunlight. It occurs when the eyes transition rapidly from darkness to brightness. Instead of processing this input cleanly, the nervous system misroutes the signal and triggers the sneeze reflex, even though no irritant is present in the nose. The underlying cause is believed to be neural crosstalk. Signals from the optic nerve, which carries visual information, pass close to the trigeminal nerve, which controls facial sensation and sneezing. In some people, intense light overstimulates this shared pathway. The brain misinterprets the visual stimulus as nasal irritation and initiates a sneeze automatically. This reflex serves no protective function. Sneezing is designed to expel particles from the airway, not respond to light. In fact, sneezing in bright conditions can increase risk by momentarily closing the eyes during activities like driving or walking. Despite this, the reflex persists because it does not cause consistent harm and is genetically inherited. The photic sneeze is part of a broader category of stimulus error reflexes, where the nervous system reacts to the wrong trigger. These errors highlight how reflex pathways prioritize speed over precision. Once a threshold is crossed, the response fires without verification. Because reflexes are hardwired and bypass conscious control, the brain cannot correct the mistake in real time. The sneeze happens even though the stimulus makes no logical sense. This reflex remains active simply because evolution favored fast reactions, not accurate ones. Hiccups. Hiccups are caused by sudden, involuntary contractions of the diaphragm, the large muscle that controls breathing. Each contraction pulls air rapidly into the lungs, which is immediately followed by the vocal cords snapping shut. This closure produces the characteristic hic sound. The entire sequence is a reflex loop, meaning it begins and completes without conscious involvement. The reflex pathway responsible for hiccups involves the diaphragm, the phrenic nerve that controls it, the vagus nerve, and parts of the brainstem. When this circuit is irritated or overstimulated, it can begin firing repeatedly. Common triggers include sudden temperature changes, eating too quickly, swallowing air, alcohol intake, or irritation of the stomach. None of these require airway protection, yet the reflex activates anyway. From a functional perspective, hiccups have no clear purpose in modern humans. Several theories suggest they may be evolutionary leftovers from early amphibian breathing patterns, where similar muscle contractions helped coordinate gill-based respiration. In adult humans, this mechanism no longer applies, but the neural wiring remains. Once the hiccup loop begins, it is difficult to stop because the brainstem does not respond well to conscious commands. Most home remedies work by interrupting the reflex circuit indirectly, such as altering carbon dioxide levels or stimulating the vagus nerve. These methods do not address a purpose, only the malfunction. Hiccups persist because they are harmless in short bursts and rare in severe forms. Since they do not reduce survival, evolution never removed the reflex, even though it now serves no useful role. Gagging. The gag reflex is an automatic contraction of the throat muscles triggered when the back of the mouth or tongue is stimulated. Its purpose is to prevent foreign objects from entering the airway. Sensory receptors in the throat send signals through the glossopharyngeal nerve to the brainstem, which immediately activates muscles that close off the throat and push objects forward. In theory, this reflex protects against choking. In practice, it activates far more often than necessary. Toothbrushes, dental instruments, pills, or even anxiety can trigger the same reaction as a genuine airway threat. The reflex does not evaluate size, shape, or danger. It responds to location alone. If the stimulus crosses a specific boundary in the mouth, the response fires automatically. The gag reflex is especially sensitive because it operates on a simple rule set. The brainstem treats the throat as a no-error zone. Any unexpected contact is interpreted as potentially fatal. There is no time allotted for judgment or correction. This makes the reflex extremely cautious but also inefficient. Psychological factors can amplify the response. Anticipation and fear increase sensitivity by priming the nervous system. This explains why some people gag before physical contact even occurs. The reflex is still involuntary, but its trigger threshold is lowered. In modern environments, this reflex often interferes with routine activities like medical exams or swallowing medication. Because it rarely causes harm when overactive, there was no evolutionary pressure to fine-tune it. The result is a reflex that continues to overreact in situations where no real danger exists. Yawning. Yawning is an involuntary reflex that involves a deep inhalation, wide jaw opening, and brief muscle stretching, followed by exhalation. It is controlled by brainstem circuits and influenced by neurotransmitters such as dopamine and acetylcholine. Unlike breathing, yawning is not required to maintain oxygen levels and does not reliably increase alertness. For many years, yawning was believed to supply extra oxygen to the brain. Controlled experiments have shown this explanation to be false. Oxygen levels remain stable whether yawning occurs or not. Current evidence suggests yawning may play a role in brain temperature regulation by increasing blood flow and air exchange around the head, though this effect is small and inconsistent. The most bizarre feature of yawning is its contagious nature. Seeing, hearing, or even thinking about yawning can trigger the reflex. This response bypasses rational evaluation and activates automatically. It is linked to mirror neuron systems involved in social awareness, not physiological need. Contagious yawning does not provide a clear survival advantage. It can spread fatigue through groups rather than improve performance. Infants and individuals with certain neurological conditions do not show this effect, suggesting it depends on higher social processing layered onto a basic reflex. In modern life, yawning frequently occurs without fatigue, boredom, or sleep deprivation. The reflex fires in meetings, conversations, or while resting. Because yawning does not cause harm and occasionally correlates with internal state changes, evolution never eliminated it. The result is a reflex that activates socially, not logically, and often without any practical benefit. Shivering? Shivering is an automatic muscle response designed to generate heat through rapid, involuntary contractions. It is controlled by the hypothalamus, the brain region responsible for regulating body temperature. When core temperature drops, the hypothalamus sends signals through motor pathways that cause muscles to contract rhythmically, producing warmth as a byproduct. However, shivering also occurs in situations where temperature is not the problem. Strong emotions, stress, fear, or adrenaline surges can trigger the same response. In these cases, body temperature remains normal, but the nervous system falsely interprets the internal state as an emergency. The hypothalamus reacts to arousal signals as if cold exposure has occurred. This happens because temperature regulation and emotional arousal share overlapping neural circuits. When the body enters a heightened alert state, it prepares for action by increasing muscle readiness. Shivering appears as a side effect of this preparation rather than a purposeful response. Unlike voluntary muscle tension, shivering cannot be consciously stopped once initiated. The reflex loop continues until the nervous system recalibrates. This can lead to shaking during anxiety, public speaking, or anticipation, even in warm environments. From an evolutionary perspective, false positive shivering was safer than failing to generate heat when truly needed. Because occasional unnecessary shivering does not impair survival, the reflex was never refined. It remains a blunt tool that activates whenever internal signals resemble threat or cold, even when neither is present. Blushing. Blushing is an involuntary reflex that causes blood vessels in the face, neck, and sometimes upper chest to widen suddenly. This widening increases blood flow near the skin, producing visible redness and warmth. The response is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, specifically the sympathetic branch, which also governs stress reactions like sweating and increased heart rate. Unlike many reflexes tied to physical danger, blushing is triggered by social and psychological stimuli. Embarrassment, shame, unwanted attention, praise, or self-awareness can activate it. The brain interprets these situations as social exposure, meaning the individual feels seen, judged, or evaluated. This perception alone is enough to trigger the reflex. Blushing serves no clear protective function. Increased facial blood flow does not prepare the body for action, nor does it prevent harm. In fact, it often worsens the social discomfort that triggered it by making internal emotions externally visible. The reflex cannot be voluntarily suppressed once it begins. The mechanism occurs because emotional centers of the brain, particularly those involved in threat detection, directly influence blood vessel control. The body reacts to social evaluation similarly to physical danger, even though the consequences are non-lethal. From an evolutionary standpoint, blushing may have once acted as a social signal of submission or honesty, but in modern contexts it offers no advantage. Because it does not cause physical damage, there was no selective pressure to remove it. As a result, the reflex continues to activate in situations where it provides no benefit and often creates additional stress. Tearing. Tearing is controlled by the lacrimal glands, which produce fluid to lubricate and protect the eyes. While tears are commonly associated with crying or eye irritation, the tearing reflex often activates without either. This occurs because the system that controls tear production is tightly linked to the autonomic nervous system and reacts to a wide range of non-damaging stimuli. One common trigger is reflex tearing caused by sensory overload. Bright light, strong smells, yawning, or even temperature changes can activate facial nerves connected to the lacrimal glands. These nerves do not distinguish between emotional distress, physical irritation, or unrelated stimulation. When activated beyond a threshold, tear production begins automatically. Yawning-related tearing is a clear example of a misfiring reflex. When the face muscles contract during a yawn, they can compress the tear ducts and stimulate the glands. The eyes then overflow with tears despite no emotional input or eye injury. The reflex completes its action without checking whether tears are actually needed. Emotional tearing itself is also poorly targeted. Tears can appear during frustration, relief, anger, or even concentration. These states activate stress and arousal circuits that overlap with tear control pathways. The body releases tears as part of a generalized response to internal intensity, not because tears solve the problem. In modern life, unnecessary tearing can interfere with vision and social interaction. However, because tear production rarely causes harm and does protect eye health in other contexts, evolution did not refine the trigger system. The result is a reflex that activates easily, frequently, and often without purpose. Reflex kicks. The knee-jerk reflex, also known as the patellar reflex, is one of the simplest reflexes in the human body. It occurs when the tendon just below the kneecap is suddenly stretched. Sensory receptors in the tendon detect this stretch and immediately send a signal to the spinal cord. The signal is returned directly to the thigh muscle, causing it to contract and kick the lower leg forward. This entire loop bypasses the brain. The signal does not travel upward for evaluation or decision-making before the movement occurs. The brain only receives information about the action after it has already happened. This design prioritizes speed over usefulness and is meant to prevent muscle damage from overstretching. In daily life, this reflex serves almost no practical function. The controlled stretching that occurs during normal movement does not require this kind of emergency response. The reflex activates most noticeably only during medical testing or accidental tendon strikes. Similar automatic loops exist throughout the body. Tendon reflexes in the ankle, wrist, and elbow follow the same pattern. They respond to stretch, not intent or danger. These reflexes do not adapt to context and cannot be consciously suppressed once triggered. The persistence of these reflexes reflects their role in early motor development and injury prevention rather than modern utility. Because they rarely interfere with survival or daily function, there was no evolutionary pressure to remove or refine them. As a result, the body continues to produce rapid automatic movements that usually serve no purpose outside of clinical examination. Baby reflexes. Primitive reflexes are automatic movement patterns present at birth that help infants survive before conscious motor control develops. These reflexes are controlled by the brainstem and spinal cord, rather than higher brain regions. As the brain matures, most of these reflexes are supposed to fade because they interfere with voluntary movement and coordination. One example is the grasp reflex. When the palm is touched, the fingers automatically curl inward. In infants, this helps with bonding and early motor development. In adults, traces of this reflex can still appear under stress or neurological strain, even though it no longer serves a function. Another is the rooting reflex, where touch near the mouth causes the head to turn toward the stimulus. This reflex helps newborns find food. In adults, the neural circuitry still exists, but is usually suppressed. Under certain conditions, such as brain injury or extreme fatigue, it can reappear. The Moro reflex, sometimes called the startle-fall reflex, causes the arms to fling outward when balance is suddenly disturbed. While useful for infants adjusting to gravity, it becomes redundant once posture and balance are established. Elements of this reflex remain embedded in adult startle responses. These reflexes persist because the brain does not fully erase old wiring. Instead, it layers new control systems on top. As long as the older circuits do not cause consistent harm, they are simply inhibited rather than removed. This is why primitive reflexes can resurface when higher brain control is weakened. Diving mode. The diving reflex is an automatic response that activates when the face comes into contact with cold water. The moment this happens, sensors in the skin send signals through the trigeminal nerve to the brainstem. Without conscious input, the body switches into a survival mode designed to conserve oxygen. The first change is a rapid slowing of the heart rate. This reduces oxygen consumption and prioritizes blood flow to vital organs, especially the brain and heart. At the same time, blood vessels in the limbs constrict, limiting circulation to areas that are not immediately essential. These adjustments occur within seconds and cannot be overridden voluntarily. In aquatic mammals, this reflex is highly developed and essential for deep diving. In humans, it is weak and largely unnecessary. Modern humans do not rely on prolonged underwater activity for survival, and the reflex does not significantly improve swimming ability or breath holding in everyday conditions. Despite this, the reflex still activates automatically, even during brief or accidental exposure, such as splashing cold water on the face. The body behaves as if oxygen conservation is urgently required, even when there is no real risk of submersion or deprivation. The diving reflex remains because it is deeply embedded in mammalian physiology and does not interfere with survival. Evolution had no reason to remove it. As a result, the body still enters an outdated emergency mode in situations where it offers no real advantage. And if you think these hidden reflexes are strange, wait until you see what your eye color might be quietly influencing beneath the surface. Watch the next video. Every secret strength of each eye color, explained in detail.